let's take another look at the problem that we just worked out with multiplication. And that problem is the 1.4 times 0.21 equaling 0.294. So this makes sense if we also take a look at this problem as fractions. So let's see the fractional equivalent of 1.4 and 0.21. We're going to multiply those two together, and we can see in another way how these multiplication of decimals work out. So 1.4 with fractions is equivalent to 14 tenths, and 0.21 is equivalent to 21 hundredths. So 21 over 100. So if I multiply these two together as fractions, I would multiply 14 times 21, which equals 294. So I would have 294 in my numerator. And then in my denominator, 10 times 100 equals 1,000. So you can see that in this fraction I have 294 thousandths. And so written then as a decimal and converting that from fractions to decimals, I know that I would write this as 0.294, which is 294 thousandths. When you're multiplying decimals, you can remove zeros that don't make a difference to the answer, and this ends up simplifying your problems quite a bit. So if you have a problem that's written like this, 0.280 times 0.6, if you remove the decimals and set this problem up like we've looked at, you'll end up with something like this, 0.280 times 0.6, and you would have counted your digits to the right of the decimal point and kept track of all of that, worked out your problem with all these extra zeros in here, and done all the work and counted over, and you would end up with the correct answer but with a lot of extra work. And so what you can do on these problems is you can look at the decimal numbers and remove unnecessary zeros. So, for example, in this problem, and I'm going to draw a line here so that we can see the difference between the two. In this problem, 0.280 can actually be written as just simply 0.28 for the purposes of our multiplication. When we report answers and when we give solutions and things like that, we do want to have a zero in the ones place, and so we usually add that back in for final answers and things. But in just doing the multiplication, in just setting up the problem, it's okay to write a number like 0.280 as 0.28. And then similarly, writing the 0.6 as simply 0.6 is also the same number, and so this simplifies your multiplication. So if I now am going to set this up removing my decimals, I would simply have a problem that looks like this, 28 times 6. And again, I would make sure that I'm counting that I have 3 digits in my decimal places, and I would make sure that once I did the math and the calculations here, that I would make sure that my answer has 3 digits to the right of the decimal point as well. But you can see that this problem here, 28 times 6, is going to be much simpler to work out than this problem here. And they're the same thing, but this is a much simpler version of it than having all of these extra zeros in here.